Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Counselor's Office. I'm Mr. Gaming Counselor, and it's time for the marathon. That's right, the marathon brutally honest impressions. Yes, impressions. I am not giving a review. A review would require playing the game, which is not even available for full release yet. I am not reviewing it. I'm giving a brutally honest impressions of the Server Slam and the alpha that I played a few months back. And with that, I did have a couple complaints that I couldn't talk about because of NDA. After playing more of the Server Slam and with the alpha, here are my general impressions, which have not changed from the alpha. I want to make something very clear. I don't think this game is dead on arrival. I'm just putting that up there immediately because there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of anger and frustration, and anyone who brings any fair criticism is met and berated by everyone who is desperate to defend this game, as if every criticism is intended to murder the game. My opinion overall is that Marathon is fine. It's an average game meant for a niche audience, but more on that later. Let's dive into specifics. A pro about Marathon, and I don't think I see many people talk about it, and yes, it is a pro. I might be critical of Bungie, but I'm also very fair, and I call out positives when there are some. I'm not sure what you'd call it, but for the sake of the video, I'll call it round evolution. Marathon provides unique experiences that separate itself from its competitors, and the fact that as time goes on, the round itself evolves. Not only do you get public events that activate, more on that later, but as the round goes on, it gets harder as time passes. Enemy numbers grow, and so does their difficulty. You'll face lower levels at the beginning, but later in the round, you'll start getting enemies with purple shields. This forces you to decide to leave early or stick around to loot and PvP more while the world around you becomes more hostile in turn. Why does this matter? Because as enemies get harder, the loot itself gets better. So you have multiple pathways to get loot: PvP, public events, keycard caches, general looting around the map, and PvE with bots. This allows you to have way more to play with. And you can go full PvP, or you could choose to go full PvE with high risk and high reward. Love Marathon, hate Marathon. The concept itself is really cool, and it's probably one of the few highlights to me personally that stand out from other extraction shooters. Now for a con, the UI menus. I know, this is a hot topic, and the main issue for many people is that the UI is hard to read. It's very text heavy, and the visual cues are hard to analyze. Now, I've seen diehard fans ridicule and make fun of people criticizing the UI and menu of Marathon, dismissing as you need to get used to it, which I would argue you could say that about every game, even the ones that have bad game design. Just get used to it, man. Well, why didn't I think about that? I think it's fair criticism that can be answered with time. It never hurts to be mindful that making the UI and menus more user-friendly for a wider audience is not going to kill the game, which Bungie has kind of acknowledged, but at the same time, they've decided to be snarky about it, which we've seen in the times past. Game developers being snarky to their consumers usually doesn't end well. Though that being said, you can make something easier to read and understand without removing the hardcore extraction aspect from the game. A pro is the runners and the shells themselves. I had played a few within the alpha, but I also spent more time playing Rook in order to run in and do as much PvP as possible. In the Server Slam, I played with everyone except Glitch. I changed my mind about runners feeling weak, especially with wall hacks and invisibility, which is very strong when paired with smoke. You essentially can escape from most, if not all, situations, especially if players get the jump on you. Those are the only two cons I felt, but mostly every other runner felt pretty balanced and not bad. I played mostly triage because I got tired of stabbing myself and healing myself constantly, so having a nice little smile buddy helping me, well, it was kind of nice. It was also kind of nice to be able to support the team, especially with Triage's full revive, which has some crazy ranges, allowing you to get the jump on opponents who think they've killed everyone. Another con is the ammo economy, for two reasons. The first one is that unless you are dropping ammo crates constantly, barely shooting your gun, and you spend all your time on the outskirts of the map to get ammo, it's not a good system. All extraction shooters have limited ammo. That's just the reality. But even buying ammo from vendors is pricey. Tarkov has multiple versions for a single gun. Some are weaker ammo types, some are stronger. The weaker ammo is mostly cheap and easier to come by. Marathon reduces the complexity by just making specific ammos work with a specific group of guns rather than having multiple types of ammo as a subtype. The trade-off is ammo scarcity. The second con for the ammo economy is the limitations to carrying ammo. In the alpha, it seemed like you could carry more ammo in stacks than you could in the server slam. You fill up half your inventory with a stack of ammo and it makes zero sense. Either one, make it so guns themselves have more mag capacity, so when you reload, you use a chunk of space during a fight, allowing you to actually loot more, or revert the changes and allow more ammo to be carried, or just give more space. If a gun is too strong and the balance is making ammo capacity the limitation, then you need to make a specialized ammo for that specific weapon so that every other gun isn't suffering due to that specific weapon. A pro and a kind of a con is the PVE in Marathon. I'm combining my thoughts on solo play in this slot because it all plays a part. Let's talk about solo first, as it's the biggest con in this section. This game is not balanced for solo whatsoever. If I remember correctly, the alpha didn't have true solo queue. You'd be thrown into matches of trios. I could be wrong. It was a few months ago, but it's very obvious that Bungie reacted to the feedback and added solo queue without actually changing anything for the solo experience. What this looks like is a bigger challenge than I think everyone expected from Marathon. I mean, Tarkov is challenging with its PvE, but Tarkov also allows you to get those really juicy one taps on enemies, especially if you land a good headshot. In Marathon, most enemies are tanky, especially as the round goes on. It is very easy to be overwhelmed and murdered with low shields and no ammo. But not just the bots you got to worry about. There are all the mines, the poison plants, the turrets, the floating UFOs that will suck you off, even purple spiders from hell. I hate those bastards. Everything in the game literally tries to kill you. It's a nightmare. But for people who want that kind of challenge, you are eating good. Now, the game itself is very centered on revives and team coordination, and I think the difficulty matches the team composition very well. You have low tier bots that can be one shot with several weapons. Then you get snipers that can really mess you up. You get beefier targets like tanks that can block you with their shields. The big boys that run around ramming you every time they can. And then you got stealthy bots that will actually chase you down. There are even high value target bosses that spawn and give you a challenge to beat. The PvE is actually so challenging that most people died from the bots before they could do PvP with humans. It's funny because the game was advertised as hyper PvP but instead it became hyper PvE. It also makes me wonder why they couldn't do a PvE mode, because the game itself is challenging already solo. Just force people solo, make a PvE only mode with some slight changes to quest, and make progression isolated to PvE and not transfer to PvP mode. Boom. Pretty easy win, I think. But overall, I think Tarkov PvE is easier than Marathon's. Everything has shields, and you won't get lucky with a high, a one-shot headshot tap unless you have the right gear to do it. Another pro are the public events that can happen in Marathon. Funny, I keep seeing people saying Marathon is just Destiny 2 public space with PvP, and they're kind of not wrong. Not the look, but the vibe does feel like a PvE public space. We already know that there are 2 other maps, Outposts and Cryo Archive, that will be released outside the Slam, so I'm sure there will be more public events. But from the Slam, the most notable public event is the Lockdown event. The best way to explain it is Firefight from Halo. You go through 3 waves, each getting tougher and producing better and better loot. I think the giant mech battles and arc raiders are cooler. They're a funner situation to deal with, but comparing it to, extraction shooters, Marathon does have some uniqueness in regard to those public events. When I think about movement in Marathon, I think about a big fat O-con. Listen, I know people are using, I believe it's glitch, and they're hopping and bouncing around, shooting players around the map. That's cool, but the movement at base is clunky and it feels bad, especially from the developer that made Destiny, which has some good movement. I'm sure there are mods that you can find that improve this, but I'm kind of tired of this excuse. Just wait till you get mods. When I think of certain aspects that should be the base level of the game, the biggest con of movement is sliding. You produce about 50% more heat which is essentially the stamina for Marathon, it feels really bad when you just slide around and half your bar is already done. Not only that, but when you slide, you receive no momentum when you go down a hill or at any angle. No speed boost, no continued sliding. I understand that there are mods and upgrades that you can use to increase movement, including the heat capacity, but I think the base should be reasonable, and if you need to nerf the higher end for the lower end, I think that should be done. Another con is the shield and meds. Listen, I understand that there are basic gear, which, to be honest, when you start unlocking upgrades and maxing out rep, you can buy top tier loot and shields and healing, but I gotta say, the floor is awful. It feels so bad to barely get hit by anything and your shield is immediately gone. Or if you need to heal, you gotta pop 30 items. Again, I understand you get better gear as you keep playing, but if the beginning experience is miserable because of the map has some of the worst healing items possible, and you've got to consistently stop fighting to stab yourself like you're a New York fentanyl addict, then maybe the floor needs to be buffed. Hell, even Tarkov, the hardest core extraction shooter, allows you to get some of the best heals early on without upgrading anything. I feel like more top tier healing and shield options need to be available from the start around the map at higher quantity. Most of the time, I just found depleted versions like candy. I'm fine having to slow down to heal, just like Tarkov. But when I get barely touched and I'm immediately back to hiding in a corner, it's not a fun experience early on. Now, once you get the green shield, you immediately feel a difference, which is fine. But I think base shields should be buffed a bit, and it could be more geared toward PvE resistance if you're afraid that the TTK will be impacted by this. Talking about TTK, let's talk about the pros and cons of PvP and TTK. Now, let me be very specific. The TTK has been changed from the alpha to be faster, and there's a lot of debate and conversation on whether Bungie should nerf TTK or not. Honestly, I think the current TTK is pretty good. There are plenty of times where you can 1v3 if your squad goes down or if you get a good flank. It's a fun time when you can outmaneuver your opponents and shit on them. I literally knifed an entire team to death. I'm not joking. PvP in general feels fine. I do think the game is far more centered on PvE currently, which apparently 40% of the deaths were from the UESC per Bungie themselves. That's not including people dying to the environment. I will say that it does feel incredibly weird that not only are there self-revives, but after you completely die, your teammates can just revive you for free. You can essentially run away, come back, keep playing. It feels like a relic of Marathon when it was intended for a casual audience, but now Bungie has turned it to make it more of a hardcore game. I feel like they need to decide on who this game is for. Stop advertising to everyone when it's clearly not meant for everyone, or make it more casual, because if you advertise to everyone and have the TTK faster while expecting casual, low-skill players to get good, that won't happen. They'll just take their money elsewhere. That reality just won't change. Time to talk about weapons and their designs. This is mostly a big fat con for me, though it's very subjective, right? Okay, I just want to say it's very subjective. I don't like the art design. It feels like Roblox and Lego weapons, which even Joseph Cross in an interview referenced them as a descriptor. Really weird. And it feels like the guns are 3D printed squares. Now, as for the feel of the weapons, it's very similar to Destiny. Actually, when we're talking about design, most of these weapons are just reskins of previous Bungie designed weapons, both Destiny and Halo. We've got the charge pistol that is like the Halo energy pistol. We've got the Halo BR. We've got the Arbalest from Destiny. We've got the Mida from Destiny. We've got a plethora of other weapons that resemble previous Bungie weapons, which is par for the course for Bungie to reuse ideas, something that they have a very long history of doing. But is that a bad thing? Well, for most people, probably not. Honestly, the weapons felt good. Some were meh or awful, but most guns are serviceable even if it's not for PvP. You can use them for PvE just the same. I will say though, the thermal scope, especially on a sniper, I'm not sure how diehard extraction shooters feel about it. But personally, I don't understand having a Call of Duty scope that takes zero skill in a hardcore shooter, extraction shooter. I don't understand how this is a thing and why it's acceptable. Now for a wombo of a pro and a con, the map and environment. Let's talk about the positives right now. I love the environment of Marathon, the swamps of Dire Marsh, the stormy weather of Perimeter, the feel and vibe of the open space, especially when you see what and, you know, that tear in reality, or what I'm going to call a tear in reality on Dire Marsh, really cool. However, the maps are too small, and I hate the art design of the rest of the map. Most of them are generic labs that seem to repeat themselves across the map. The buildings feel incredibly out of the place. The color tone doesn't match the environment and just clashes with it. And to me, it just doesn't look good. Which, let's be honest, this has been a big subject of debate since Bungie first revealed the alpha footage. You either love it or you hate it. The truth is, you're neither wrong or right if you choose one or the other. But even the art direction wasn't the deciding factor when reevaluating my stance on Marathon. Granted, I knew months back about these maps and the art style, but NDA, again, kept me from saying anything. All right, we've got to talk about another con that's just a reality we live in, but anti-cheats. People were already cheating after a day or so playing Marathon, and I knew it would happen. I don't think I've ever ran into a cheater, but there are plenty of clips of people running around testing new cheats. So much for Fog of War. It's comical because some tweets talked about not being shot by cheaters. That really didn't age well. Let's be brutally honest. There will always be cheaters. It's the nature of PC online gaming. It's a war that will never be solved. However, what matters for the future of Marathon is how fast Bungie can combat cheaters. Even Tarkov has a cheater problem, and you think a price tag will keep people from cheating, you are wrong. If Bungie does not combat cheaters faster than they do Destiny 2 cheaters, the game will suffer, especially at the rate at high end, people will just stop playing, especially when they release the raid-like map Cryo Archive, which Tarkov has that in the form of a high-tier map called The Labs, and it generally is full of cheaters. All right, the lore. Mostly a con for me, but there is a pro. I think overall the faction designs are pretty well. Like, I'm all Arachne, but fuck, I love Mida. Mida has a vibe, but screwed Nuke. That's for some bitches. The general cutscenes from Marathon are clean, which is what's expected from Bungie. However, the narrative is not this big, amazing thing that Bungie has been trying to sell and get people to buy Marathon for. Destiny players have conditioned Bungie to think that putting lore books as reliable, articles in the codex is the main delivery of narration. It's the biggest failure I've seen in a video game. People don't play extraction shooters to read books. Most people don't want to stop in the middle of the action to read. If people want to read, they go read a fucking book instead of playing video game. We don't know what else Bungie has cooking with the narrative, but it seems like the biggest part is the codex, which is just an awful experience for a game that isn't Dark Souls. Or Resident Evil 9, which essentially gave a cliff note of previous games to help you catch up. But to have to stop and read countless pages to understand the world of Marathon is just a terrible choice, and immediately shows Bungie doesn't understand what the general gaming audience wants, because that's not it, Chief. All right, now we get to the drama section of the impression, because one thing people need to realize: when you buy a game that relies on other players, you will 100% have to deal with its community. And the Marathon community has some of the most vocal, toxic bots I have ever seen. Well, mostly because they've come from Destiny. There is a lot of forced hate versus forced positivity, and I feel bad for the average Joes who like Marathon, because most of them don't care about the haters. It's the people from their own community that's more embarrassing. When anyone gives any form of criticism, it's met with beration. Like, you're immediately being berated. I think you can like Marathon, and I think you can hate Marathon. You can be indifferent to it. It's a free market. You can criticize the billion-dollar company. If you love the game, support it with your money. I do think a lot of people are upset about Marathon because Destiny died for this game, and that's a fair feeling and observation to make, considering Bungie has shelved Destiny for quite some time, and maybe a year or more before we start seeing some positive turns for that franchise. But we ain't talking about Destiny 2 right now. Marathon, in my most brutally honest impressions, is a fine game. It's not the best game. It's not the worst game. It's not that innovative. If anything, all it does is pull from other games. The only innovation is the round evolution for the extraction shooter genre. If you were to do a blind test before this game was announced, you would not be able to tell that this game was made by Bungie. That's the reality. This game doesn't feel like it took 6 years to make, especially considering there's only 4 maps and 2 of them are very medium-sized. This game feels like it's early access, and I don't think adding 2 more maps is going to change that feeling. That's my honest impressions from the alpha and beta. Lastly, I know someone is screaming, Bungie's gunplay! That's what makes it feel like a Bungie game. But the hardest pill for the Bungie community to swallow is that Bungie no longer has unique or superior gunplay anymore. Once upon a time they did, but the reality is that modern games have risen to the challenge and have drastically improved gunplay, and some even innovated upon it. Bungie is no longer the pioneer of first-person shooters. If Bungie gunplay was that unique and superior to other modern games, then Destiny 2 would be far more popular outside of the obvious scandals and missteps from Bungie. 6 out of 10. That's what I gave High Guard, and that's what I give Marathon. Both games were fine. Nothing game-changing, nothing genre-defining. They were fine. And I know for many, fine isn't enough for them. Reality for people who like Marathon, that is enough for them. But for the reason that people care about player numbers and popularity is because, one, either they're the cult of Bungie, who are unhinged individuals who have undying loyalty to a billion-dollar company, like a cult, or two, they're content creators whose their rent depends on popularity of a game. That's the brutally honest truth. But the truth is also, Sony cares. Sony cares about all that, and we have no idea how Sony will react with Marathon if it doesn't reach its incredibly high standards. Marathon is a niche game within a niche genre, which is fine. If you like Tarkov, that is normal. That is fine. But again, Sony didn't spend $3.6 billion for a niche game. But that's not my problem to solve. That's Bungie's. I'm Mr. Gaming Counselor. This is my brutally honest first impressions. Let me know what you think down below. I won't be doing a brutally honest review. I have no desire to buy in. I gave the game a fair shake, both alpha and the beta, and I'm not convinced. So I'll let the others who want to do reviews, I'll let them do it for you. As always, I'll see you in the next video. Game out.